beginning, the party looked like it was having a good time, so we waited a little. I'm Nancy Friedman. I'm here on behalf of our executive director and our president of MDPL. Jack, you here?
Here.
Yes. Jack. Jack in his wonderful Art Deco shirt. Jack is the president of MDU. Our executive director is at another event, and we're very proud to announce that he couldn't be with us because he's getting a major award for historic preservation from the Dade Heritage Trust organization. That's the other organization in the state of Florida that saves the properties in the rest of Dade County. We do Miami Beach, they do all the rest of Dade County, and we do the best we can, and we've been at it for 40 years. So stay with us. We're going to be here forever. So tonight is my pleasure to welcome you and introduce you to our panel of who are going to talk about. This is the second of 4 panels. The first one, how many of you came to the first one about Espanola? Fantastic. Oh, good. Well, you have this one and 2 more, and then we will put together our next series for the fall, when everybody's back after the summer. And we're still debating on what we're going to do to top this one. So tonight is about Collins Avenue. The next one, which will be May 1st, is going to be about Ocean Drive. I always confuse which is coming first and second. Ocean Drive, and then the last one on May 15th will be about Lincoln Road. And for each of the panels, we have people who have worked or lived or they just enjoyed or have started their careers. The speakers are people who actually began a lot of their later lives, earlier lives in the street that we're talking about each time. So now I'm going to turn this over to our moderator, Jeff. Okay. You ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
You got to come over here.
You might want to bring Charlotte. Thank you.
How are we move it?
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Well, welcome everybody, and Jonathan, thank you very much for your hospitality here today. We really do appreciate it, sir. This is the second, as Nancy mentioned. This is the second of our presentations of the great streets of the Miami Beach Art Deco District. It's in celebration of the anniversary of the creation of the Art Deco District, recognition of it by the United States Department of Interior in 1979. So the idea here is that we're going to talk about these streets and the people involved with them. We're not so much going to talk about what everybody knows about John Collins, because you can Google that. But you can't Google what our panel is going to tell you, because it's about them and Collins Avenue. So before we go, I point out, in 1981, 2 years after the district was recognized, the Miami Design Preservation League commissioned a preservation and development study. It was called the Anderson-Notter-Feingold study. And this is a copy of it. And they had some things to say about Collins Avenue. One thing they had to say, Collins Avenue will focus on tropical health spas, juice bars, health food restaurants, dance and exercise studios for the fitness-minded tourist. 1981. But this one is a little more interesting in many ways. Collins Avenue between 11th and 12th Street is a potential development site. The Tudor, the Palmer House, and Kent hotels on Collins Avenue are underutilized seasonal hotels which could be packaged as an excellent development opportunity. The dream. So, what I would like to do is have our guests talk for about, our panelists talk for about 3 or 5 minutes about how they met Collins Avenue. What did they bring to that meeting? So I'm going to ask Allan to lead off. Allan, what was your first date with Collins Avenue? And also, how did your subsequent training as an architect lead you to reflect even more about Collins Avenue?
So thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Nancy. All that in 5 minutes? Okay. My first encounter with Collins Avenue was actually when I was a kid. I think I must have been 6 or 7 years old, although I think we came many times before that. My grandparents stayed the winter at the Marlin Hotel on Collins Avenue, and we would always make it across the causeway, fly into Miami, make it across the causeway, drive up Collins Avenue, and I must say, even as a kid, it was a pretty alluring, and this was in the late 60s, early 70s. It was an incredibly alluring space. I think I was already starting to become an architect. But I came back to do a graduate degree in 1991 at the University of Miami, and I decided I wanted to live in Miami Beach, which is a completely impractical decision if you're going every day down to Coral Gables, but I after having sort of checked out the area, I really wanted to be in Miami Beach. I was living on Meridian, right off Lincoln Road. Lincoln Road was kind of my street. I met a guy in my graduate program named Randall Robinson, who Jeff and I have subsequently worked on it. I think many of you know him well, who kind of encouraged me to begin to take it more serious in an academic way. And then I've spent the last I don't want to tell you how many years, but a lot of years doing research about Miami Beach, building types, the history, the urban spaces, public spaces of Miami Beach. I really wanted to contribute to the discussion of what makes this place tick by looking not just at style, but at the urbanism and how buildings make urbanism. And so I, have been doing that. Most of my practice a lot of my practice has really been centered right here along Collins. And I would just say really briefly, for me, Collins Avenue is kind of the spine of the beach. It's the most complex street, I think, architecturally. When you think of how many neighborhoods it cuts through, how many distinct conditions it cuts through. There are many distinct streets on Miami Beach, but somehow Collins Avenue pulls many things together. And there's a lot of innovation on Collins Avenue, a lot of innovation in the way buildings are assembled and the way they were built originally, how they were formed, and how they've been reformed over time to adapt to current conditions. So I think Collins Avenue is like the laboratory of Miami Beach.
Great. George Neary. George, of course, is formerly the executive director of the Miami Design Preservation League and formerly the associate vice president of the Greater Miami Convention Visitors Bureau for both cultural tourism and for LGBTQ+. George.
Very good. I think I've always been a preservationist. I remember writing letters in Hartford, Connecticut to save brownstone stores that were slated for demolition. So I think that was in my blood long before I discovered Miami Beach overall. a friend of mine bought a building on 25th Street next to the Hebrew Academy. It was at the time in 1989, I love telling the story, 9 apartments, $220,000. So she bought that building thinking she was going to live here, and it didn't work out, and she needed a manager, and I was living in New York City, and I decided, I had come down a few times on vacation, so I decided that I would come down and manage the building. I rented my apartment in New York, threw everything in a car, and drove here. One of the first things that I did was take the Art Deco tour with Jeff. And I always credit that because almost 40 years later, now that I'm retired, I do conduct tours, having learned how to from Jeff and from the Preservation League. As far as Collins Avenue is concerned, Jeff has a way of teaching, and that way is that you have to pick a building that you'll speak about, and everyone in your class in tour school picks a building. I picked the Marlin Hotel. That was my favorite building, and it still is. The frieze work on the front, Ellery Dixon, the work. Now remember, in 1991, it was a rundown. Before that, up to that period, it had been a crack house. And the owner, Island Records, Chris Blackwell, hired Barbara Huliniki, who had cut her teeth in fashion and design in Carnaby Street in London, and that's where Sonny and Cher and the Beatles and everybody went. And she colored the buildings in pastel colors. She colored that building in, not pastel, circus colors. At the time, we were just horrified, but under my breath, I thought they were fine. But anyway, that was an introduction to Miami Beach, and that's Collins Avenue itself. When I came here, I knew very few people, none, and the first thing I did was make a phone call, which Nancy answered, and I asked her if she needed a volunteer, September of 1991, and she was so thankful, and I was thankful, and so that was my people, and it was in Shabin, in the Marlin Hotel, in the downstairs, with mismatched chairs and great Jamaican food on Collins Avenue. And a year later, when I knew by then a few more people, they had a surprise party for me upstairs, Nancy Ganner and everybody. And believe it or not, Grace Jones was staying. And while she walked in and they were setting up the party, she said to everyone, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, we're going to have a party for our director and blah, blah, blah." So she said, "I'll surprise him, but, you know, those days there was no social media." But she said, you know, not a lot of pictures because she was just going to. And I'm telling you, down the stairs comes Grace Jones, and I have pictures of her to this day celebrating my birthday at the Marlin, but upstairs. Shabin was still there, but of course I see a few nodding heads. You'd have to have been here in '91 to go that far back. I just want to add that some of the most amazing hotels are on Collins Avenue, farther up, farther down. You mentioned the Palmer House, you mentioned the Kent. To stand across the street, and it was built that way so you could see the facades all lined up before someone else just put a building in the middle of it and wrecked it. But those are three. I mean, you know, the Delano is further up the road. Way, you know, down south, there's other hotels that are amazing. So I really fell in love with the Art Deco District, and I'm pleased to have played a role in it, but I think the strongest element of Miami Beach is the historic quality of Collins Avenue, and I have, as I mentioned, a very personal relationship with that street, which, you know, will remain forever. Thanks.
George, tell them how many people were at your farewell party compared to the 8 that were.
So I worked for 7 years at the MDPL, and then I had a farewell party there at the Ritz Plaza. But when I left the Convention Bureau, because I merged basically all of the wonderful people that I kept friends with from MDPL all these years, and we had, you know, 4 mayors, commissioners, a couple hundred people. It was amazing, and Yeah, at the Sagamore. It was wonderful. And Nancy and Jeff, of course, were there. And Nancy, and again, I met her on almost the first day I arrived, and we've been, former executive director. We have a lot of history together. So a lot of emotion and feelings about Miami Beach and the people who live and work here.
So, Peggy Benua, can you also talk a little bit about your training in hospitality that you also brought to this? Also, how you met Collins Avenue for the first time?
Sure. I'm Peggy Benua. I'm the general manager at Dream South Beach Hotel, which is the Palmer and Tudor House buildings. And I came down here in 1988 to attend the hotel school at Florida International University, and lived in the Grove. But one of my, I was getting my master's degree, and there was somebody in our study group that rented an apartment on top of News Cafe. And we always had these group projects, feasibility studies, et cetera, et cetera. So we used to come out and meet, maybe go to Cleveland or after and have a beer or whatever. But Collins Avenue back then, for me, and being new to Miami, it was just older people on rocking chairs. That's really my impression of Collins Avenue. And then after I graduated, I started working for a large hotel chain in management training program out in California. I was transferred from San Diego, LA, and then I took a job with the Meridian Hotels in Dallas, Texas. I was there for 5 years, and then I was recruited to come back to the Eden Rock as the assistant general manager. And that's on the other side of Collins Avenue. So since that was in 2000, so I say that Miami Beach has been my professional home since 2000 for over 19 years now. Collins Avenue, because we, up at the Eden Rock, the whole draw for tourism is South Beach. It was then, it is today. So we kind of studied South Beach, studied all the attractions, trying to see how we could capitalize to bring visitors up to 41st Street. Then I was transferred as general manager to the Marriott South Beach, which is on now the Stanton, which is a historic name, on Ocean Drive down on 1st Street. Again, we studied South Beach, we studied Ocean Drive, we studied Collins. And then I was asked to take a look at this project, the Palmer and the Tudor, which were purchased by a group in New York, Dream Hotel Group, and they were looking for a general manager. So those two hotels, they were not on my radar even after 8 years of being in the market. And so I walked down there with the gentleman I was working with, Director of Sales and Marketing.
Up there now.
And we walked around, and there was a big green fence around it, and there was like an old decrepit office chair sitting on the terrace that the security guy sat in because it was under renovation. And I said, I don't know about this. And then they flew me to New York, and they shared with me the vision of Dream South Beach. And so after I saw that, I said, yes, I'm on board. And I came back, and I've been here at the hotel since we had a soft opening in 2010, and we had a grand opening in 2011 as Dream, which is, as Jeff mentioned, the Palmer and the Tudor combined, and there's a bridge that over the rooftop that connects. And with me here tonight is our James Anderson, who's the area director of sales and marketing for Dream Hotel Group in Miami, in South Florida. So, thanks for coming.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about historic preservation and how historic preservation affected your encounter with Collins Avenue and your work here and so forth, but also how the place here in Collins Avenue and your work on Collins Avenue affected your involvement with historic preservation. So Allan, do you want to start with that one?
Well, again, through Randall Robinson, I met all of you when I became a member of MDPL and became involved with MDPL. MDPL back in, I guess that was maybe early, mid-90s or something like that. I think one of our tasks was to see what was going on at the Historic Preservation Board. So we went every day, and not every day, every day that they were hearing, to hear the discussion and to basically express the opinion of MDPL. So that was really interesting for me, and it was a way to sort of get engaged and see how the process worked. And then, you know, I started to, out of that interest in seeing what was happening here, develop my own practice. And I had my undergraduate degree, I had my graduate degree from the University of Miami here, where I was teaching already. And I started writing about the district and then became very interested in working on these buildings. I think there's something for an architect that writing is one thing, but actually working on buildings, thinking about what happens next, that next layer of Miami Beach, became really important to me. And actually, I began out of seeing both how the Historic Preservation Board worked, and also through my own looking at these buildings to kind of develop an idea about layering. It seems like this is a very layered city, that you have, you know, the original wood buildings of the 1910s, you have the Mediterranean architecture of the 1920s, you have the Art Deco of the 1930s, you have the post-war modern of the 1950s, you have a late 60s layer, which are those buildings built on top of parking. You have a 70s and an 80s and a 90s. It's so many layers, it's actually quite fascinating. I began to think that really part of the responsibility of an architect was to always to preserve those layers, to respond to those layers, and to be part of the next layer. And I'd say that had a big influence in the way I understand architecture, the way I understand the city, and the way I understand Miami Beach. And I still see Miami Beach that way. It really is quite amazing. I don't know of any other city like it where so much rich history is compacted into such a small space, and where things are allowed to live. Things are not replaced as they are in so many other American cities. So anyway, that was my background.
Allan.
I want to talk a little bit about your work on this building.
Sure. So.
Before I wanted to, I think you're absolutely right about the layering, and if you could just mention some of the things that you have participated in within the layers.
Oh, sure. So Nancy was just saying, what have I participated in within these layered systems? Well, one of the first really solo projects that I got to work on a major scale was Brown's Hotel down at the tip of Ocean Drive, 112 Ocean Drive, which is Prime 1. Many of you may know it's Prime 112. It's the first hotel in Miami Beach. It's the Adam and Eve of hotels in this resort city. If you think about it, it is the first one, and it's built in wood. Which is quite extraordinary. I mean, I would say the building department was highly skeptical that building should or could be preserved. But I would say that, that really takes us back to the origins of Miami Beach, the origins of this city as a hotel city, as a city of hundreds of hotels. I worked on, let's say, the Anglers Hotel, which was, a hotel of the 1920s. It had two pieces of the 1920s, and we added a super thin piece on the side that is contemporary, and a piece in the back of one of the buildings that's like a pool cabana structure. Just in the 1930s, we've done many, many buildings, but let's say this one, which we finished about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago maybe. This hotel is the Carlton. It's connected now to Dixon's, Elmery Dixon's Betsy Ross, across from Betsy. This was the Carlton, this was Henry Hohauser. So two great architects, separated by an alley. I guess, very important to maintain the integrity of each piece of it. We didn't want to marry them too much, like make them too, like they were the same architecture. It is really two different buildings, and yet they are joined, and they're joined, you know, confronted with the idea of how to join two buildings. We didn't want to use a prosaic bridge. We wanted to use a piece of public scenic, which is joining the two buildings across the alley in the back. Right now, just to skip ahead a few layers, we're working on a hotel on 9th and Washington, right behind Washington, which was an old assisted living facility. It's a building of 1968. I don't think anybody would consider it a charming building. It's like a 6-story kind of functional building on top of parking. But you know, a client that we did another project for several years ago hired us to turn that into a boutique hotel, and so that's happening now. And so, you know, I think it's actually a great experience for an architect to work across these different periods of time and get to experience the architectural logic of each one of those time periods, which is always distinct, you know. And yet, you know, I'm saying that they're distinct, and yet there is a glue that holds everything together here, that makes the city greater than the sum of the parts. You know, each layer of the city learned from the layers behind. Each layer sort of learned from the layer before it and the layers before it and adapted, and there was a kind of a logic that went into the construction of buildings that gets each time a little bit more refined, and you know, and then we get to today, and it's quite a complex city, and you know, real city, which I think is extraordinary. So,
George, you want to do a little bit? You talked a little bit about historic preservation and your involvement and so forth. But Collins Avenue, of course, was one of the scenes of one of the great historic preservation stories, the Senator Hotel.
Right.
But you heard about it.
Right. I got here in
How many
19...
exaggerated stories did you hear about?
Well, I've heard a lot of them, I'll tell you, but when I saw the Senator, and you know, sort of, you know, the New Yorker and the Senator were two glorious buildings that I never saw, but they were just two beautiful buildings, and it's sad that they both became martyrs to the cause because they were, I wish they chose other buildings. I was in Nancy's living room when she was living at 9 Island Avenue, and we were working on a project. She was still the executive director, and I'm looking in towards the beach, and I remember this so clearly. I was a volunteer yet, and I said, Nancy, what is this gigantic thing that's moving along Collins Avenue? And it was a demolisher with a big ball headed for wrecking ball, headed for the Pink Sands Hotel. And I watched it from her living room, and we were doing something as the ball started swinging and destroying that beautiful hotel that could have been the cornerstone of a larger space, could have been many other things. The owner, who happens to have a street named after him, which I'll tell you about him in 1 second, but A Boulevard is the common name. But I will tell you, I met him with Allan. We traveled to Israel together, and was able to get him. All developers could see up to that point was money. Not that they're changed today, but that's all he could see. And his quote, "I can't see the invisible, so I can't do the impossible." And that's what he said. We went to Israel to see the White City, to be able to learn from that area, which had been completely gobbled up almost by modern architecture and a growing city. But we were able to show them, most countries don't have volunteerism the way we do. So we were showing them an Art Deco weekend and what we do, which in those days was maybe 20 years old. And the purpose was to get people to come and see the buildings. It had a real purpose. It wasn't to buy, you know, Art Deco items. It was to get people to come and see how glorious those buildings were. So that was a business proposition. And we were sharing that with our colleagues in Tel Aviv, who have this amazing district. But anyway, as far as preservation goes for me, I mean, I was paid staff, meagerly paid. Insurance? No, that didn't exist in those days, as Nancy can attest. I mean, you really had to be committed. And so that when you got up to speak, they could feel the passion in your voice because you had made a commitment to do that. And so for me, that was very important. And we were trying to get the first historic district, we had a saying, if you can't beat them, vote them out of office. So Nancy and others began to come into the government to change the way of thinking that the commissioners had, because people thought this was junk. You know, when you live in a hometown, you grow up with some things, you think you have no appreciation for it. People have to tell you, gosh, that's a gorgeous dress, and you're like, this whole thing. So that's the way it is here. You needed someone to come in and say this was amazing, and then people began to think, oh, this stuff. And so little by little, the philosophy changed and we began getting elected officials. So we did our first landmarking, I think was in '93, with the Human Rights Amendment, which we'll talk about in a second. But for me, there were more historic battles, and everything was a battle. Don't think anybody handed us anything. But was getting commissioners to change their view. And how you do it was bringing school children in with drawings of the buildings. Isn't that adorable? Isn't that wonderful? Oh, these cute little kids. You know, what did W. Fields say? Never have a kid in a movie with you because he's going to upstage you. Well, you had to think of different ways to engage these people. And drawings helped. The other thing, one of the compliments I was given, when Commissioner Gottlieb said to me at the time, they were voting on the first historic district beyond this one, she said, please, no more faxes. Because before there was internet, you know, I had everyone I ever met sent fax letters to the commission, because when they get letters from Detroit and California and New York, it means more than they get one from across the street. So every friend I ever had sent in letters about how important the Art Deco District was. So everything, as I say, was a battle. And lastly, and I'll end with, the last building that I worked on was the Ocean, the one down by the Betsy, which had a 7-foot addition put on in the 50s. And the owner was going to demolish the whole building, but we got him to take the 7-foot aluminum front off, and behind it was this beautiful Mediterranean Revival facade, Ocean... Edgewater.
Yes.
The Edgewater was my last hurrah, and we were able to save that facade and change the thinking of that whole crowd of people into saving that. And then much of it in the back is new, but they were bent on doing something else. And so everything was a battle, and luckily the tide had turned in our favor. Nancy and others were commissioner. They were appointing colleagues to Historic Preservation Board, other, design review boards. So everything wasn't, a blood sport, and we were able to do more preservation projects together. Thanks.
So Peggy, you came to work on Collins Avenue. You weren't a historic preservationist deeply committed to your heart yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Tell us what happened here on Collins Avenue. This change took place.
Well, when I first came down to this end of Collins Avenue, one of my cousins, my grandmother was English, and so I had a lot of English cousins, and he just was going on and on and on. He lives in England, near Manchester. Oh, the buildings that we love, Art Deco, and I was like, what? And so I really didn't, I didn't understand the appeal to the international community. And this is someone who's my contemporary, going on and on, and he's an attorney, he's an educated man, about Art Deco and what an appeal that was. So that kind of planted the seed. And then as we were working on the hotel, because I was here during the construction phase of the project, there was a lot that I learned about Art Deco, we studied it, we read books, because of course we're overseeing these buildings, and so we wanted to learn about the history of them and the elements that make it unique Art Deco to the Miami Beach. I do have to tell you a story. When I first got to the Eaton Rock, they had just finished the renovations. And I do triathlons, or I did triathlons and a lot of training, and I knew this guy named Tom. And he was a triathlete, and he trained with a guy named Jason, who was a fireman. But at the Eaton Rock, I kept hearing about Tom Mooney, and everyone was afraid of Tom Mooney. And so one night, I was at the Chamber Gala. It was like several years later, and I was like, "Oh, hey, Tom, I knew you worked at the city of Miami Beach." He introduced me to his wife. And I said, "You're Tom Mooney?" I was like in shock, and that was like 3 years later. So, but again, we've been great friends now, and it just seems that the work, and he was leading tours to your dream, until he got promoted and got to good. But it just seems that there is definitely an appeal to. I mean, we market a lot of international business. The French, we do a lot of French incentive business. They love Art Deco. They love a boutique hotel. They love the history. They love the location. And so that's something I'm very grateful to the preservationists that they were able to put these controls in place so we didn't lose these wonderful buildings.
Tom Mooney, for those of you who don't know, is currently the planning director for the city of Miami Beach. He's also a tour guide. And I forgot, how many tour guides do we have here today? A good number. Great. Okay.
I just want to give you a little more flavor. Jeff and I are the oldest ones who are involved in this, right? There's nobody who comes near us. Age. But we still have the same drive that we had when we started long ago. But I just wanted to explain the fact that the first preservation board, it took wild clamoring, marches and threats and letters just to make a preservation board, because without a preservation board, you have no guidance. Tom Mooney couldn't do all that himself. He'd do a great job, but he had a real job. So we finally got the city. It had to be back in about 1986 maybe a little preservation board. And the preservation board was made up of 11 people. They were not architects, they were lawyers, they were lobbyists, they were people who hated Art Deco or any thought of preservation. And finally, it took about 4 or 5 years from then to make up a real board. In other words, the board says if you're going to do something in a historic district, you have to go to the board, and they guide you into how it should be. Because if you just tear down buildings and build them up in any which way. So we finally got a preservation board that understood it, but the time and energy to get to it explains why the preservation movement is so important in this city and around the country.
So George, if you remember, I said that Collins Avenue was supposed to focus on tropical health spa, juice bar, and exercise studios for the business-minded tourists. But something happened.
Right.
What happened, George, on Collins Avenue in the early 90s?
Well, one other thing in the late 80s as well, you had, it's hard for people today to imagine abandoned buildings, older folks, chairs in a row, no one coming here. But there were people that could see beyond the rundown, dilapidated, and many of them were gays and lesbians. So one of the first forays into the future was a rundown building called Hoffman's Cafeteria. And it was taken over and turned into the Warsaw Ballroom, which became one of the most important, well-known discos, nightclubs in the world. And it was so creative because every 2 weeks, they would redo the entire club, and with new designs and lighting and color, themes. So, and I can assure you, anything and everything happened there. And people went because they never knew what to expect, and they wanted to experience the what to expect. But because of that, it encouraged a gentleman by the name of Lee Schrager. You know Lee Schrager today because he's the chief operating officer for the South Beach Wine and Food Festival. But he had another life before that. And I'm going to read you something he sent us. I opened Torpedo, for those people who may or may not remember, it was another one of the major gay clubs on Collins Avenue, and another one that became quite well known around the country, with his business partner, designer John Jacobs. At the time, the only other gay scene was the Disco Club Warsaw. So many people would go back and forth between the two bars. Torpedo would get busy early in the night, and everyone would start there, then go dancing at the Warsaw, and then come back to Torpedo to wind down for the end of the night. Torpedo was a very local, cruisy crowd, and everyone knew everyone. At that time, Gianni Versace began hanging out at Torpedo, and when he had his photo shoots, he would bring in his supermodels, Naomi Campbell and Cindy Crawford, and they would all take over the bar space. About 9 months later, in 1988, the gay bar Ombre opened, and we were very worried we would lose business to Ombre, but it was the exact opposite. More people started coming to South Beach to go out, and our business actually increased as more gay clubs opened on the beach. Torpedo's big night of the week was Tuesdays. Our club promoters were a group of guys that called themselves the Bone Boys, B-O-I-Z, and they would put together a different theme every Tuesday, like Boys of Brazil. We had the same go-go dancers every week, dressed up in different costumes, and we would pack 1,000 people in the doors. So that gives you a little bit of an understanding of kind of what took place. On Thursdays, we would do a 2-for-1 drink special, and then on Saturdays, we had our tea dance extravaganzas. We had an amazing opening night. The Del Rubio Triplets, a group of women in their mid-60s, who had the slogan, 3 girls, 3 guitars, 1 tube of lipstick, were the performers that night. Torpedo was also known for their Halloween parties. We would close, now imagine, we would close Collins Avenue between 6th and 8th Street, invite all the big disco performers. One of the most memorable events we hosted at Torpedo was Grey Gardens, for those who know what that is, where we screened the movie and had little Edie Beale sing and dance after the movie. Edie kept shouting to the packed house, "I love the boys." So anyway, this gives you a little taste of what it was like. In addition, they were attracted to these buildings and could see the glass block, could see the eyebrows, could see the beautiful coral rock, could see all these beautiful elements that other people thought was junk. So they ended up being supporters of Barbara Kaplan and Andrew, and supporting them in marches, in argue, fight, whatever it took to be able to long-term make South Beach the world-famous capital it is today.
Back in the day, we used to talk about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The SWOT analysis. Just very briefly, if you can, do a SWOT analysis on Collins Avenue today. Anybody want to go first? Go ahead, Allan.
Just hearing that story, George, I was thinking, it's really amazing one of the things that really makes Miami Beach work is the fact that people can go from club to club and back and use the city. The city is basically part of, moving back and forth through the city is a wonderful experience, and it makes for so much more multiplicity than would happen if we were just going to destination points. And I think in terms of strengths, that's one of the strengths, that there's so much density here and intensity along Collins Avenue that it supports a lot of life. It supports a lot of activity and a lot of food and beverage and culture and everything else. And I think the other thing that's great about Collins Avenue is that you can start at one end down at South Point, and you can keep driving along Collins Avenue for miles, and you can see the whole developmental history of Miami Beach, and that's an extraordinary experience. Maybe I'm just an architect, but I think that's an amazing cross-section of life to drive down Collins Avenue. So the walkability, the human character, the human sort of touch everywhere you look. I mean, it doesn't look overly manicured in a sense. We can debate, like some of the state that buildings are in, but it feels like just a really good place to hang out in a very informal way. Weaknesses, it's, that's a good question. It is, of course, traffic clogged in certain areas of it. So if you're not walking, or even if you are walking, you're encountering cars. And I think at some point that's got to be part of the analysis. The next layer of Miami Beach, what happens with all those cars? But I think traffic up and down this spine of Miami Beach is difficult. I think there are places where a little bit of connectivity is lacking. Like I think South Beach kind of works. I think the area where, going up through the Delano and those hotels, but as you get farther north, it becomes a little harder to walk easily between places that you might visit. And then as you get into the canyon and above, even more spread out. So I would love to see that experience of Collins Avenue continue further all the way through North Beach, Mid Beach, North Beach, in the same way, to have it all connected more. With the A and the T?
Opportunities and threats.
Opportunities. Well, I think that connectivity would be a great opportunity to see things tied together more, to be able to expand what we understand of Collins Avenue by being able to go as far north as the northern end of Miami Beach at least. And in terms of threats, I have a very easy one, which is sea level rise. I mean, resilience and how we deal with water and with wind, both coming from storms, coming from tides, coming from rain events. It's an issue for the city. Luckily, it's an issue that I think the city is engaged in. One of the projects my office is working on right now is Resiliency for Historic Districts Guidelines project. So we're looking at how historic districts can begin to, through coding and through incentives and other tools, begin to confront this issue, proactively. But it's a very difficult issue because we have a beautiful historic city and we don't want it to change, too much either. So how do we work with that? So stay tuned. But I think that's the
Peggy, from the front.
Okay, I'm going to give you my SWOT analysis as a hotel manager, and definitely the strength of our location. Collins Avenue is very easy to get around. It's you can walk to the beach. It's a great location. It's out of the the craziness of Ocean Drive, but not too far away, so you can take advantage of that and then retreat back to the sanity of Collins Avenue. So we feel that our location is our biggest strength at Dream South Beach. The weaknesses are we're not on the beach, so that's we don't have views of the ocean. And many guests want to pay to, have a balcony overlooking the water, which we can't offer them. But then conversely, we do have a rooftop pool with the ocean, so that's another one of our strengths. Opportunities are, again, making improvements to Ocean Drive. I call that's the golden goose. That's why people come here. That's why people want to be in South Beach, so they can be enjoying the beach, Loomis Park, the restaurants. We sit outside on a sidewalk cafe and have a cocktail or something to eat that they think they're died and gone to heaven. So those are the kinds of things that we want to have, accessible and for our guests. Threats from a hotel, it's all the new hotels, all the supply that's coming on board, which is great because, as the destination becomes more popular, we're going to need those hotels. But the convention center reopening, the hotel that's going to connect to the convention center is going to bring a lot of high-end citywide conventions, medical conventions, financial conventions. We just had Sea Trade, which filled us. James, we didn't even have a block. We weren't even in the block, but we had people with badges. And these are people staying a long time. They're paying good rates. They're not, they're the kind of guests that everybody in Miami Beach wants. So that is definitely an opportunity for us. But, again, the new supply, demand will grow. I keep saying there's Miami Beach, there's always going to be more and more people that want to come to Miami Beach because it is the jewel of our country, really, the Riviera of the United States. Warm weather and great location on the water. So yeah, sea level rise is a threat, but that's not something that a hotel that we list on our slum.
Thanks, Peggy. George, will we ever get juice bars?
I can't say to that, but I do want to start with threats. And I want to say that part of our American culture is we're a future-driven society. It's just in our DNA. And secondly, we believe that bigger is better. It's in our DNA. And how you can convince people that a high-rise building is not the answer to every problem that we have in this town. And that's the basis for the problem we have, because we have people, some of whom happen to be commissioners and beyond, who they're raised with that. How do you get out of that cultural norm, that acceptance? And you see it happening. It's creeping in. You see it on Washington Avenue. You see it going to happen on Lincoln Road. So it's not to say it's not going to happen on Collins Avenue. It's not going to, it doesn't stop. And if they looked at a place like the Betsy, thanks to Jonathan and his family, they're making good money, I know that, from this hotel. Did they have to put a 10-story addition on? No. So I think there are creative ways to, and I worry about Collins Avenue, destroying the uniqueness, destroying the beautiful connectivity, and all of that's here because people think, oh, we need to, and we don't. And that's the threat. A strength is, the Art Deco District is and the heart of it is Collins Avenue, is known throughout the world. Not only Ocean Drive, of course. In addition, is the amazing, architecture that we have here in abundance. And I can tell you from 30 years of doing walking tours and engaging people with a tour, when you're done, there are many preservationists right there. Because they've seen something now they never saw before. They're now looking at details in buildings. They're now looking at important edge glass and all those other things. So, I think those are all strengths, that we have these amazing buildings that are so important to us. But how do we get people to get out of their culture and change the way that they think and be more creative about what they're going to do, rather than just slapping 6, 7, 8 stories? And I'll give you one last example. It's not on Collins Avenue, but it's on Belle Isle, there were these beautiful little Mediterranean buildings, which are all gone, and now you drive by and there's all this megalopolis that's going up where you can't even see the ocean anymore. And so, everyone thinks, oh, we have to, because that makes more money. I mean, I think that's a tragedy, and I'm hoping, unified-wise, that we work together to prevent other tragedies and other demolitions, and you have to be vigilant. I really thought when I left my charge that things would get easier, and it just hasn't happened. I mean, people would knock a hole in the dream if they could put a hot dog stand. I mean, you have to watch every minute. I don't mean that necessarily, but I'm saying people will, do anything if, and that's what you have to watch out against.
So, time for questions. So, a couple of things. First off, we had some experience that people, even though our topic last time was Espanola Way, we ended up talking about Lincoln Road, which is not the goal. We're going to have a Lincoln Road night. So try to keep what you're asking about Collins Avenue, and of course the things that people have said as well. Carolyn will come and put her hand on your shoulder. That way we'll be able to say that gives you permission to leap up and speak. If you want, I'll repeat your question. So raise hands if you have a question. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Jeff?
I have two questions for Allan. One is backward-looking and the other is forward-looking. One of the things I love about Collins Avenue is the finials. And the replacement for the Senator Hotel has your name on it. And it has a finial. And I wondered if that was your idea and if it was a conscious effort to pay homage to the Senator Hotel.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. This, what Jack's referring to is the Senator Hotel site, which was, a storied site in the history of Miami Beach, was a parking lot for many years, and we recently designed a hotel that is being finished right now, which is on the corner of 12th and Collins. And the thing about the finials is that there was a tradition on Collins Avenue, and it happened mainly on the northeast corner of every intersection where hotels, the Essex, the Tudor, of course the Senator, the Beach Plaza, the Tiffany, thank you. They all had this finial on that northeast corner. They also had a very interesting strategy with the building kind of made a beautiful wrapping terrace porch that looked right onto the intersection and a little courtyard behind. Really beautiful. And the Senator was a missing finial. And so absolutely that was a priority. And I must say, we thought about it. We didn't want to literally replicate the building because I didn't think that was appropriate. The building's been gone for, 30, 40 something years. But we wanted to do something that paid homage to that building and to that finial. I mean, in other ways, that building also pays homage to the Senator with certain other moves in the courtyard and everything. But that was a very important thing to bring back.
And then my forward-looking question. You talked about the connectivity of Collins Avenue. And you also talked about the dead space in North Beach, where for blocks and blocks and blocks, there's nothing on either side of Collins Avenue. The west side of that thoroughfare is beginning to attract plans for future development. What's your vision for how to develop that, and is the city moving in the right direction?
I'm probably not up on the latest things that the city has been doing on those lots, although I was involved up to a point in trying to master plan a series of them for for a project that I was working on. My vision for it would be that it's another urban frontage, that buildings like Ocean Drive, perhaps a little taller. There are several blocks of buildings just a few blocks south of that area that you're talking about. It must be in the high 70s perhaps, that are about 60 feet tall, maybe 70 feet tall, that make very nice urban frontage until you get to those 8 blocks that face onto North Shore Open Space Park, and then you just have parking lots mainly. And so I would love to see that line of buildings continue to make a great frontage in the way that Ocean Drive makes a great frontage, but a Collins Avenue version of that, to bring it back to Collins Avenue. And I think it should be unique to North Beach. It shouldn't be, let's say, a copy, but I think one could begin to think about mixed uses. I think people should think about, I mean, personally, I think a bit of social equity in that area, like not thinking all about market rate, but some ways of making sure that, you know, people who have lived in that neighborhood for a long time can stay. Affordable, you know, some affordable housing in there as well. I think there's ways to balance that, but those are very, I mean, that must be the most attractive development opportunity on the east coast of the U.S. I mean, 8 blocks of beachfront, you know, access right onto a park, you know, in Miami Beach. It's a fantastic opportunity, but I think the city should also think in that project about how to use that project, not just to develop a frontage and to develop real estate and to use unused space, but to think about how to pull other areas of North Beach together in a more coherent way. And I know the city's been thinking a lot about that recently with zoning changes and historic preservation districts. But I think that area, it's still, you know, it doesn't have this, like the area right behind, which is Harding, doesn't have the strength on its own to, you know, I think it needs more depth and it needs more connectivity of the neighborhoods behind to the ocean. And I would also love to see, you know, I don't think it should be parking oriented. I don't think that it should reinforce the high speed. That's one of the things that really negatively impacts those blocks. I mean, you know, I've driven through it myself millions of times. You know, of course, there's no traffic lights, there's no stop signs, you know, and going the other way down Harding, it's the same thing. You're just kind of practically magnetized to drive at high speed through that area, and I think it's not good for the neighborhood. So I'd like to see it slow down.
There is hope. There is hope. The Ocean Terrace, I don't know how many of you are familiar with North Beach or live in North Beach, but there is a very big plan in place. It's starting to move. Moving something through the city is worse than moving the circus elephants through to the parade. It doesn't happen easily, and nitpicking doesn't help. And then there's community input. Everybody wants it to be what they want it to be. I've heard silly things that should be put on that beautiful open space on Collins they call the West Lots. People seem to be forgetting there are people who live right behind it, and there are people who want to make it into some kind of entertainment district. So it's a matter of waiting and controlling, but I know that the Ocean Terrace is beginning. And the first thing they're going to do is improve the look of the ocean front and the, the dune. By doing that, they feel that people will get a better feeling for the neighborhood. If you go up there now, the historic buildings are old and ragged, and they're just waiting to be restored. The developer has taken the bull by the horns and he's going to put his money into it to jumpstart it. So that will be the beginning. The ocean, the west lots, I don't know, because the city owns the west lots. It's very difficult dealing with the city who doesn't know what to do with it. So there is hope. It is the next coming, and I think everybody should support it. Tell whoever you know who's in City Hall, it's very important. Allow this to happen.
Any other questions?
Each of you has touched upon the importance of government. If the right people are not on the land use board and on the commission, preservation will not happen. What is going on with the effort to change the composition of some of the land use boards? Is it good, bad, or indifferent? And further, I don't know what was done on this subject at the commission meeting yesterday, but the day before, MBU put out a piece that sounded very, very alarming. And I think that the overlay of everything we're talking about here tonight, if this means getting the troops out, if there's going to be a structural change or personnel change that could be adverse to preservation, we all need to act.
Can you bring us up, no, I was going to ask you, can you bring us up to date on what happened yesterday? You know, I mean, I want to comment on something.
The preservation is, in some circles, still, after 40 years, is still looked upon as something negative. So, a couple of people on the commission decided maybe it's time to change the people who sit on these boards. And the preservation board, which I proudly sit on, is being looked at as a place that we could take away one preservation seat and put in place somebody who understands about water and sea rise and all of that. Sea rise has become the most critical issue in this country and in the city, and it's time for the people who understand it doesn't take the place of historic preservation. Its preservation will become part of the plan. But it's going to take time. We're going to see changes. They want to take somebody off each one of the land use boards. That would be preservation, the design review board. They're going to take a person off there, and the land use board, the planning board. They're going to take somebody off there. It has not been voted on yet. We don't even think that there is enough people who are going to, enough of the commissioners to support it. We only know about 2 of them, and those 2 won't be there after the election in November. So just keep your fingers crossed, and if anybody asks you, jump right in and tell them it's a ridiculous idea to change these boards.
As if I may say, an activist, I was horrified. I was not happy, and I believed, how can I say this vaguely, one of the most important Historic Preservation Board members does not live in a historic district, and I believed it was designed because I want to get rid of her, and I'm just saying that right now. So I didn't say who, so, you know, in a court of law, but I'm telling you, why would you do that, right? I think it was directed at a person who is not living in a historic district. Yet, they think they need it, but they don't need the experts, the people from Dade Heritage Trust and a person from MDPL, but they want an expert to live in a house or live in a district that's historic. I mean, that's what I mean. I think it was all designed on purpose, and I think in answer to your question, you need to follow it closely, and when the results come out and we're not happy with them, MDPL needs to send out a call to arms, and we need to go to the commission as we've done before and put them in their place.
My name is Anna, and we have an apartment at the Deco Blush. We have a southeast exposure from our balcony, so we look directly at the Lowe's Hotel, which is on Allan's Avenue. My husband is an architect, and he suffers through anything that's being destroyed. And we suffer through an event like that. Maybe it was a small event, and maybe Lowe's that was built, I don't know, 70s, 80s, does not fall under the Art Deco definition. But there was a small turret that was matching with the top of the building in the back.
What building?
Lowe's, like a turret. That's a spire. Yeah, spire that matches with the top of the Lowe's Hotel that they were tearing down. We were watching it. The bleeding eyes. They built something banal, like something for music stand or something like that. That was really matching that turret or video, whatever you call it, was matching with that top of the building. My question is, does the historical preservation apply to a newer building like this?
Not necessarily, and I think, that's a really complicated question. Actually, without knowing more details about what was done, when, where, and so forth, it's really difficult to bring that up. But you're welcome, obviously, to bring that forward to the league, and to ask the league to make it, because the league does have the power so far to bring things directly to the agenda of the Historic Preservation Board. And so that is the pathway that I would suggest that you take in that.
And I want to say thank God for historic preservation, because I moved to Europe from Europe in 1976, and I found out about the Penn Station, and I saw pictures. It was like a palace to the people. It was like a cathedral to the people. What happened now with they put a horrible replacement there. And I only saw pictures because I came afterwards. But as I said, my heart bleeds every time I look at the pictures.
So Carolyn and Charlotte are both here. Daniel is not here today, but if you would give them, one of them, Carolyn, and Charlotte, raise your hand. If you would give them the details of what you saw, then we can bring that forward to the HB board, which we have a voice on. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead, Carolyn, please. Thanks.
Yes, I'm Blake Young. I live in North Beach, and we have the Deauville Hotel up there. I think you guys are familiar with that. Is the city handling that appropriately? I mean, they're currently in a lawsuit. There's a lot of things going on. I've been watching this very closely. I've been watching the building die in front of me. And then I also wanted to get an input on the Sherry Pontiac, because we had an improvement passed for that building, and wanted to get your opinion on it, or the board's opinion on what they felt about that improvement. That was
I want to talk about the house.
Second part.
There's nobody else here.
Go ahead.
The first one you mentioned,
The Deauville Hotel.
the Deauville, after the hurricane, the owner just didn't take care of it. And the city has been forcing and threatening to demolish it. The Historic Preservation Board has put up an enormous fight to never allow that, even if the city has to take over that hotel. I think it would be great if you would come and follow it. Yes. Just as you did with the historic building on your street, Henry. It just takes watching. The owners refuse to pay any to take care of it. It's really pathetic. What was the other one you mentioned?
The Sherry Contact, what you thought about the improvements there?
Oh, I haven't seen that. I didn't know that there had
The
been.
historic board approved an upgrade for windows on the back of the building, cabana.
It was before, how long ago was it before the board? Oh, in the rear. Is it going? Is it not going well?
No, I just wondered, it was approved, and it looks like they're gonna make some changes and still keep it historic, but they're making some modernization in the back with larger windows. They were changing the foyer a little bit, basically raising, there was some modification that would lose some of this, would change the look of the building, and I was just wanted to hear what you guys thought about that change in look.
Well, the modifications are in the rear, from what I recall. It's the thing that we are very hard on is the front of the building being preserved as is. Repaired, yes. Fixed, yes. No changing windows, none of that stuff. The rear, I remember they had reasons because they were enlarging their pool. So whatever they're doing has been reviewed, and it seems to be going along very well.
We have one more question.
Adam, do you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to mention briefly, with due respect, I don't think the current commission and Mayor Levine Slate are being all that subtle. They're going up and down most of the boards and proposing removing somebody from the Day Heritage Trust or MDPL and replacing them with somebody from what would I say? I'm sorry, the business group. What's the business group that? The Chamber of Commerce. They're not being that subtle at all. And I think Nancy's point is well taken, and we should get involved in the historic preservation is very important. And we want no one even complained that anything was wrong with the boards and commissions. They just decided to change them. We need to get involved so we can keep historic preservation alive in Miami Beach.
Thanks. Okay. Jonathan, our host, gets the last word.
I'm opening first, and I'm raising the screen for a reason. I want to salute all of you. I especially want to salute, well, everybody, but I want to acknowledge, of course, Allan's enormous contribution to the building we're standing in. And not only the neighborhood appropriate building we're actually standing in, which of course is a new build next to a restoration, which we all did together. Second thing, and by the way, this is Betsy on my right, and Catherine Hepburn on my left, who just stumbled in from the Pride Parade last Sunday. I always, now I'm in George's presence, I need to talk about arts and culture for a second. There are a few things going on. First, the reason I raised the screen, we have a number of exhibits up that are appropriate for this crowd. Behind me is the work of the extraordinary culture Pete. The dogs, one second. Pete Turner, who is an extraordinary colorist in photography and did some of the most iconic jazz album covers ever done. You probably don't know his name. There's a cover of a book in the back called The Color of Jazz, but Stanley Turrentine, Ron Hubbard, Roland Hanna, Steely Dan, etc. So you get a moment before you leave. All this work was being done as Miami Beach was coming back, so it's time appropriate. On the other side, in our restaurant, by the way, this exhibit was just put up so recently that it is not yet labeled. And on the other side, we have a new exhibit up of iconic photography of Muhammad Ali in Miami Beach, never shown before. There's some important photographs that will be well known to you, him standing over Sonny Liston, him posing with the Beatles. But on the far wall of the restaurant are 20 small images which come from the Louisville Courier Journal archives, and we believe they've never been seen before. So, not necessarily tonight, but when you get a chance, wander through and see that. Tonight, starting in a moment, two festivals have moved to Miami and are resident in the Betsy now. One is O Miami, which is Miami's all-important poetry festival. April, of course, is National Poetry Month. So Miami is, doing double time. There are things going on all over town virtually every night. New book out, actually Katie and Betsy put a new book out today. It's called Dog Poems. Scott Cunningham is the founder of that, now resides here at the Betsy with his team. Keep your eye out for O Miami events. They're happening constantly during National Poetry Month. Also moving to the Betsy is something called the Miami Music Festival, about to be renamed, so there's no confusion, the Miami Beach Classical Music Festival, which is in its 5th year, 1 year at FIU, 3 years at Berry, now in residence at the beach. In June and July, they'll do, you're going to hear me right here, 70 to 80 concerts in Miami Beach. I repeat, 70 to 80 concerts. What they do is attract conservatory students from around the world who come and take master classes. And of course, those students want to perform. So they're performing every night. It's orchestra, piano, chamber music, and full-on operas, June and July. And tonight, because they're with us all year long, it used to be the Miami Summer Music Festival. Unfortunately, a lot of plates at eye level for Betsy, and she's having a tough time. Exactly. But tonight, you'll have a hard time getting a seat, but in our main lobby for an hour, beginning momentarily, is a pop-up opera event. I think it's Zarzuela tonight, which is sort of comic Spanish opera. Really incredible stuff, extraordinary singers, the Miami, soon-to-be Beach Classical Music Festival. But finally I'll say, yeah, it's hard, Betsy, I know. That food's not meant for you. But I would say finally, one of the other extraordinary opportunities in the SWOT discussion is how Miami Beach, we have to puff our chest a bit and stand taller and say, has become the arts and culture center for the southeastern United States. And we stereotype ourselves as being skinny girls in bikinis and sand and sun and fun. That all's true, but only represents 35% of who we are. The other 65% are some of the most interesting and interested people in the world. George has had a heavy hand in making all this happen over many years, but it's accelerating. Within a 10-minute walk of here, I'm not going to say it to you, as you all know, there are like an extraordinary number of cultural institutions. I can't imagine other places in the world other than Manhattan where that's true. In our case, it's much easier to walk to them than it is in Manhattan. So thank you all for being here. We're thrilled to host.